Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. The maid of the Lu family. I begged not to become a servant girl, but at 8 years old, I was still sold by the slave broker into the Lu family, a prestigious household renowned for its scholarly heritage. One of the Lu family's ancestors had once earned the title of third-rank scholar in the imperial examinations and eventually rose all the way to the position of chancellor. It was only in recent years that the descendants of the family failed to achieve anything noteworthy, forcing the household to settle in Wuzhou instead. But even a starving camel was still bigger than a fat horse, no matter how much the Lu family had declined, and no matter how far they had fallen from their former glory. They were still among the wealthiest families in all of Wuzhou. The Lu family was a refined household of scholars, a family of culture and propriety, so naturally their standards for servants were extremely high. Usually, servant girls bought at 7 or 8 years old would first be handed over to the steward mamas for 2 years of training. They would be taught embroidery, needlework, and the rules of the household. The family would even hire a somewhat educated steward to teach them basic literacy, enough to recognize a few characters so they would not appear like ignorant commoners and tarnish the reputation of the Lu family. After the 2 years of training, duties would be assigned according to aptitude. Those with good talent and pretty appearances would have the opportunity to become personal maids serving the young masters and young ladies. Even those who were less outstanding could still become second or third-rank maids, able to enter the master's rooms and occasionally appear before the family. As for girls with poor abilities, they could only become rough servants responsible for sweeping courtyards and performing hard labor. There were 6 other little girls who entered the residence together with me. All of them were 7 or 8 years old, and all of them already understood what they needed to do for their futures. In order to catch the attention of the masters, the girls all worked desperately hard studying embroidery, needlework, and literacy. Only I was different. Every day, I merely followed the steward mama around learning the rules of the household, sprinkling water and sweeping the courtyards, tending to the flowers and plants. As for embroidery, needlework, and reading, I was hopeless at all of it. The steward mama's surname was Wang. Mama Wang was an old servant of the estate. She had been sold into the Lu family when she was young and was later entrusted by the current old madam, who had been the eldest madam at the time, with the responsibility of managing the household. Mama Wang's son was now an attendant serving at Master Lu's side and was highly valued. Mama Wang had spent her entire life in the Lu family. She worked diligently and was deeply trusted by the madam. Because I often followed beside Mama Wang, she grew especially fond of me. But every time she watched me embroider, she could not help sighing, "What a hard-working girl. How are your hands this clumsy? Such a beautiful rooster, and you've embroidered it into a crooked, sickly chicken." Mama, I was actually embroidering a wild goose. As for learning characters, I was even worse. Out of the words taught by the steward, being able to write half of them correctly was already considered impressive for me. Either I missed strokes or wrote them so crookedly that they looked utterly ridiculous. Still, at least I could recognize a few characters. Fortunately, I was born hardworking. I diligently handled all the rough chores, sprinkling water, sweeping courtyards, tending flowers and plants, and inherited much of Mama Wang's skill in those tasks. Thus, 2 years later, all the other girls were smoothly assigned as second and third-rank maids serving before the masters. Only I, thanks to Mama Wang's wholehearted recommendation, became a rough servant maid in Boya Courtyard. Boya Courtyard was the residence of Lu Yan, the eldest young master of the Lu family. Among the current generation of the Lu family, eldest young master Lu was the most promising. Despite his young age, he had already earned the title of Shuozai scholar and could compose elegant essays with remarkable talent. the entire family placed enormous hopes upon him, expecting him to restore the Liu family to glory once again. Because of this, in order to ensure he could study peacefully within Boya courtyard, only 2 second-rank maids, Hong Xing and Bai Tao, were responsible for cleaning the eldest young master's rooms. As for personal duties such as grinding ink, changing clothes, and tidying the study desk, those were all handled by the young page Zhang Sheng and the wet nurse Mama Zhang. Mama Wang brought me into Boya courtyard to pay respects to the eldest young master and receive a name from him. At the time, the eldest young master was seated beside a desk reading. He had just reached the line of poetry, as the willow blossoms fall, the zigui bird cries. He lifted his eyes and looked me over twice, seeing my slightly dark complexion and thin, scrawny frame, thinking I resembled a tiny sparrow. He casually gave me the name Zigui, a perfectly proper human being, yet I was given the name of a bird. I felt utterly depressed inside, but I could only respectfully thank him and bow as I withdrew. From beginning to end, I never once raised my head to look directly at the young master, because doing so would have violated the rules. I lived in a servant's room located in the rear courtyard of Boya courtyard. Living together with me were Mama Li and 2 other rough servant maids like myself. One was named Chun Mei, and the other Hong Mei. Hong Xing and Bai Tao did not live together with us. Normally, they stayed much closer to the eldest young master's quarters so they could conveniently attend night duty. Mama Li was also an old servant of the household. However, she had become a widow while still young and never remarried afterward. After all, living in the residence guaranteed food and shelter. When she grew old, the household would provide her with a simple coffin and a bit of funeral money to handle her burial arrangements. Mama Li treated us extremely well. Perhaps because she had no children of her own, she regarded the few of us as if we were her real daughters and carefully taught us. Whenever the masters rewarded her with fresh pastries, she would always save them for us to eat. Whenever our clothes were torn, Mama Li would immediately mend them for us. Little servant girls like us were not allowed to leave the estate. So every time Mama Li went outside, she would always bring us back little novelties, small toys, new hairpins, or pastries from Hong Shun Bakery. But if we made mistakes, Mama Li would also smack our palms hard as punishment. Mama Li often said, "We are servants. We must keep to our place and do our duties properly. Don't learn from those shameless little seductresses who spend all day doing no work and only dream about climbing into the young master's bed and becoming concubines. Aren't they afraid the madam will skin them alive? Bah! Shameless, lowly creatures. I'm telling all of you this right now, never forget your status. Don't covet things that don't belong to you. Otherwise, before the madam even has a chance to act, I'll slash your faces first and then break your legs." I knew exactly whom she was talking about. I had overheard Chun Mei and Hong Mei gossiping before. Chun Mei said, "Did you see it? Today Bai Tao wore a pink peach blossom in her hair." Hong Mei replied, "I saw it. A pink peach blossom matched with a green dress. Only she would think of something like that. She goes through all that effort just to attract the young master's attention, doesn't she? What a pity. Eldest young master only cares about studying. He does not even spare her a glance." I had already been in Boya courtyard for an entire year, yet I had never once seen the young master, because Boya courtyard had strict rules. All rough work in the courtyard had to be completed while the master was absent. No one was allowed to disturb the young master while he studied, so every day, before dawn during the evening hour, I would already be awake, hurrying to finish sweeping the courtyards before the Mao hour arrived. Then, before the young master returned from the academy, I would quickly tend all the flowers and plants in the garden. The rest of the time, I stayed with Mama Lee washing clothes and sewing. Since Chun Mei and Hong Mei remained in the rear courtyard, they truly had very few opportunities to see the young master. Occasionally, Mama Wang would come visit me. She and Mama Lee were old acquaintances. The two of them would sit together drinking wine and chatting while I nodded off sleepily beside them. Whenever I woke up, either Mama Wang's outer robe or Mama Lee's blanket would already be covering me. The young master's wet nurse, Mama Zhang, along with Hong Xing, would also often come to the rear courtyard to visit us, bringing pastries from the young master's quarters that were no longer completely fresh for us to eat. But from beginning to end, Bai Tao never once came. Well, that made sense. She was wholeheartedly determined to become a concubine someday. How could she possibly look kindly upon rough servant maids like us? Most servant girls in the residence had 4 possible paths in life. The best path was naturally climbing into the master's bed and successfully becoming a bedchamber maid. If she were lucky enough to give birth to a son, she could become a concubine. Though her status would still fall far below that of the legal wife, she would at least become half a master herself. Naturally, there would be no need to worry about food or clothing anymore, and she could even have 2 servant girls attending her. Wasn't that wonderful? The second path was reaching a certain age and having the masters arrange a marriage for her. The match could be with a servant boy in the estate or a steward from one of the family's manors. Later, the children they gave birth to could continue serving within the Liu family as well. There were also some women who chose never to marry. Widowed from youth or simply remaining single, as long as they loyally served the household and behaved properly. The estate would take care of their funeral arrangements once they grew old. The third path was having relatives come redeem them and bring them home. For maids who had served in the residence for many years or had earned some favor before the masters, the family usually would not make things difficult. Sometimes they would even provide a generous sum of money before releasing the servant. The final path, and also the path chosen by the fewest people, was saving enough money to redeem oneself. The reason hardly anyone chose this road was, first, because the redemption fee was extremely expensive. Second, most servant girls who redeemed themselves had no family or friends outside. Even if they left the estate, they would have no one to rely on. Life would become unbearably difficult. It was better to remain in the residence where, at the very least, food and clothing were guaranteed. Third, servant girls who redeemed themselves were often viewed differently from those lovingly reclaimed by family members. People frequently criticized them for being ungrateful or disloyal, and they were generally disliked. Thus, the days passed one after another. Before I knew it, I had already lived in Boya Courtyard for 2 years. Yet during those 2 entire years, I still had never once seen the young master. Occasionally, Chun Mei and Hong Mei would secretly hide behind corners in the rear courtyard to peek at the young master returning from the academy. But whenever Mama Lee discovered them, a beating and harsh scolding were unavoidable. I was not someone who enjoyed bringing suffering upon myself. There was no reason to get beaten over a man whose face I had never even seen before. I was not insane. After Mid-Autumn Festival passed in the 8th month, the weather gradually began turning cold. Mama Lee started coughing heavily. At first, none of us paid much attention to it. We simply assumed it was an ordinary chill that would clear up after a few days. Until that day, when we were washing clothes together, Mama Lee suddenly began coughing violently. Then she coughed up a mouthful of fresh blood, collapsed backward, and lost consciousness. I hurriedly rushed over to support her upright, my hands and feet fumbling helplessly in panic. Mama Lee was the person who treated me best in this residence. No. Perhaps the person who treated me best in this entire world. At that moment, only one thought remained in my mind. Nothing could happen to Mama Lee. I pressed hard against the point beneath her nose. Then for the first time in my life, I completely ignored all rules and bolted out of Boya Courtyard. The Lu residence was truly enormous. I ran for what felt like forever, passing through a moon gate, crossing a small bridge, racing down 3 different paths before finally spotting Mama Wang in the distant garden. I rushed forward and dropped to my knees before her with a loud thud, panting desperately, crying so hard I could barely breathe. I said, "Mama Wang, please save Mama Li." She just coughed up blood and fainted. "Please, Mama, please call a physician to treat her." I cried until my voice became hoarse, completely unaware that there were other people around us. Mama Wang smacked me hard on the head. "You unruly girl. The madam is standing right here, yet instead of greeting her first, you kneel before me?" Only then did I finally notice the beautiful woman standing beside Mama Wang. She wore a purple silk standing collar robe, with a light blue brocade over jacket draped over it. Beneath it was a pleated woven blue skirt. Upon her head rested an elegant jade gourd hair ornament inlaid with gold, dignified yet noble. A polite, gentle smile rested upon her carefully maintained face, but if one looked closely, there was also a faint trace of authority hidden beneath it. So this was the mistress of the Lu family. I hurriedly kowtowed to apologize. "Please forgive me, madam." This servant became too anxious and violated the rules. "I beg madam to punish me." Mama Wang quickly pleaded on my behalf. "Madam, this old servant failed to discipline the girl properly. Please forgive her for this first offense. Her intentions were good. When we return, this old servant will definitely discipline and punish her appropriately." Lady Lu ignored Mama Wang and instead looked directly at me. "Which courtyard are you from?" I respectfully answered, replying to Madam, "This servant is a maid from Boya Courtyard." "Boya Courtyard? Since you belong to Boya Courtyard, why did you not seek help from eldest young master instead of immediately begging Mama Wang beside me?" Only then did I look toward the 2 young men standing beside Lady Lu. They were similar in height, and their appearances resembled each other somewhat. Most likely, one of them was the eldest young master, while the other was the second young master, the eldest son of the second master, only 2 months younger than the eldest young master. The 2 young masters appeared to have just returned from the academy. Both wore blue and white scholar robes. Their young pages stood beside them carrying heavy book satchels. At first glance, they almost looked like twins. But one youth possessed calm, steady eyes and an expressionless face, standing quietly with his hands behind his back. The other looked far more mischievous. His beautiful eyes curved slightly upward, the corners of his lips lifted in a faint smile, while dimples appeared and disappeared upon his cheeks. How could I possibly know which one was who? Could I really say that I had never even seen the young master before? Lady Lu noticed my frozen silence, my wide eyes darting back and forth between the 2 young men, utterly confused. Seeing me stand there blankly, unable to answer, she suddenly laughed. "Don't tell me you cannot even recognize your own master." I could only grit my teeth and answer honestly, replying to Madam, "This servant is merely a rough maid in Boya Courtyard, responsible for sweeping the courtyards. Mama Li instructed us never to clean in front of the young master so as not to disturb his studies. Therefore, this servant has never had the fortune of seeing the young master." "And you never secretly peeked?" Replying to Madam, Mama Li said such behavior violates the rules. This servant did not dare. "How long have you been in Boya Courtyard?" Replying to Madam, 2 years. 2 years? Ha, good. Very good. After speaking, Lady Lu covered her mouth and laughed softly twice before turning to Mama Wang. "Take this girl to fetch a physician." Then go to Autumn Branch room and collect 2 taels of silver for Mama Lee. Tell her she has worked hard and should properly recover from her illness. I hurriedly followed Mama Wang out to fetch the physician, completely failing to notice the teasing laughter of the young man behind me. This was my first time leaving the Lu residence, the first time I had stepped into the outside world of this era. After leaving the Lu residence, we turned right onto a street about 300 meters away. Both sides of the road were lined with tightly packed shops. Street vendors loudly called out their wares along the bustling avenue, creating a lively and vibrant scene. For a moment, I suddenly fell into a daze. It had been such a long time since I had seen a place this lively. I had almost forgotten that I was someone who had transmigrated into this world. I came from another world, a world filled everywhere with towering skyscrapers. A world with smooth transportation systems and lightning-fast technology networks. A world where beautiful women with slender legs could be seen everywhere, and handsome young men in short-sleeved shirts openly called for equality among all people. A society without class divisions. A society without slaves or servants. I had almost forgotten that I was not truly a maid at all, but a university student from the modern world. When the impossibly rare event of transmigration happened to me, I did not feel excitement or eagerness to challenge this unfamiliar world. I only wanted to survive peacefully here. And how was I supposed to survive? Not by stubbornly resisting this world or fighting against this society, but by clearly recognizing reality, understanding my own identity and circumstances, keeping to my place, and fully blending into this world. Only then could I continue living safely and peacefully. After Mama Wang and I brought the physician back, Mama Lee's illness was treated. Fortunately, it was not beyond saving, though the physician warned that she must not overwork herself anymore. Every day, after finishing my own duties, I would brew medicine for Mama Lee and sit beside her talking. She would always sit on the chair near the doorway, quietly watching me chatter away, occasionally responding, smiling gently as she listened. I felt that this kind of life was already very good. Every day there was work to do. There was no need to worry about food or clothing. There was someone beside me who cared for me warmly. The days were peaceful and calm. What more could anyone ask for? Mama Lee's health remained poor, and she could no longer sew clothes for us. Seeing winter approaching, I worried the winter clothes distributed by the estate would not be warm enough, so I carefully cut apart the fine cloth rewarded by the masters during the New Year festivities and sewed Mama Lee a thick red jacket embroidered with magpies. Mama Lee touched the jacket in disbelief. "You really made this yourself?" "Yes." "And this magpie embroidery too?" I nodded. "With craftsmanship like this, how did you end up assigned here as a rough servant maid?" I stuck out my tongue playfully, hugged her arm, and rubbed my head against her chest while acting spoiled. "Isn't it because we were fated to meet? So I could meet such a wonderful mama like you. Don't you think so?" Mama Lee smiled and lightly smacked me twice. "You little girl." Then she hugged me tightly in her arms. After the first lunar month passed, the red plum blossoms in the courtyard had not yet even begun to bud. I was brewing medicine for Mama Lee in the inner courtyard when the young master's wet nurse, Mama Zhang, suddenly entered. She informed Mama Lee and me that Madame had promoted me to become a second-rank maid serving beside the young master. I was utterly shocked. How could this happen? How could someone as invisible as me possibly catch Madame's attention? Besides, the inner courtyard already had 2 second-rank maids. Hong Xing and Bai Tao had always done their jobs perfectly well. Why suddenly mention me? Wait, Hong Xing and Bai Tao. Could it be? I looked up at Mama Zhang. She nodded before speaking, that Bai Tao secretly stuffed a scented pouch into the young master's hands. On it was embroidered a pair of mandarin ducks. At that exact moment, Madame caught her in the act. Madame ordered her beaten 20 times with the rod and then summoned a slave broker to sell her away. I stood there speechless. For the first time, I truly felt how cheap a servant's life was in this world. A maid sold away by the Liu family would certainly never meet a good ending, but why suddenly promote me? Chun Mei and Hong Mei entered Boya courtyard earlier than I did. Mama Zhang said, "Do you remember the last time you met Madame while trying to fetch a physician for Mama Li?" I nodded slightly. Of course I remembered. That incident had nearly frightened me to death. Mama Zhang continued, "That time, Madame found it amusing that you had already spent 2 years in Boya courtyard without even recognizing the young master. So she personally questioned Mama Wang about you. She learned that you handled your work properly, knew your place, and had never once crossed the line. Therefore, when Bai Tao caused trouble this time, Madame personally chose you to replace her. Only then did I finally understand. So it was because I was foolish enough to attract Madame's attention. Keeping someone like me beside the young master meant Madame would never need to worry." Leaning against Mama Li, I muttered softly, "I don't want to go." Mama Li tapped my head. "The Madame's orders have already been given. Whether you want to go or not, you must go. You are a good child, so I have nothing to worry about. But I still must remind you of one thing. Keep to your duties. Do not allow improper thoughts to arise. Remember this well. Remember it clearly." I nodded obediently. "I understand, Mama. Don't worry. I would never do such a thing." After becoming a second-rank maid, I no longer lived together with Mama Li. Instead, I moved into Bai Tao's former room and shared it with Hong Xing. The room was not large, but though the sparrow was small, it possessed all 5 organs. Besides the sleeping bed, there were dressing tables, chairs, and all kinds of furnishings. Hong Xing was a very kind person. After the new year, she had already turned 16, 2 years older than me. She was thoughtful, attentive, and exceptionally good at taking care of others. Previously, she had often accompanied Mama Zhang in bringing pastries for us to eat, so we were already fairly familiar with one another. Hong Xing had been sold into the Liu residence after her family suffered a disaster. Back home, she still had parents and siblings. Over the past few years, relying on the monthly wages Hong Xing sent home, her family managed to start a small business. Their circumstances had gradually improved, and they now wanted to redeem her from the Liu residence. But Hong Xing said she wished to remain in the Liu family for another 2 years. The Liu family paid very generous monthly wages. She felt it would not be too late to leave once she was preparing to marry. At first, I knew absolutely nothing, but Hong Xing patiently taught me little by little. For example, exactly how hot the tea the young master preferred should be. The fruit and pastries in his room absolutely could not be left overnight. The flowers arranged in the room did not necessarily need to be any specific variety, but there absolutely had to be fresh flowers and greenery present every day. The tables and chairs in the room also needed to be wiped down daily. All of these tasks had to be completed while the young master was away at lessons. Whenever the young master was inside the room, we had to do our best not to disturb him. As for personal tasks such as changing clothes, grinding ink, and preparing the bed, Mama Zhang and the young master's page, Zhang Sheng, naturally handled those duties. Unless Mama Zhang or the young master personally instructed otherwise, we were not allowed to interfere in those matters. Furthermore, I immediately took out paper and brush, sitting properly like a student in class as I carefully wrote down every single thing Hong Xing said. Looking at the 5 entire pages filled with precautions and rules, I truly wanted to give up. Hong Xing curiously picked up the notes I had written and teased me. Mama Zhang said you're foolish, but I don't think so at all. Isn't this quite clever? Mama Zhang is right, I said seriously. My memory is poor, and I'm rather stupid. If I want to do my work properly, I need to rely on little tricks like this. Hong Xing carefully examined my handwriting. Isn't this style called hairpin flower small script? I froze for a moment. Damn it. I forgot to be careful, but my expression did not change. What's hairpin flower small script? It only looks a little similar. Hong Xing shook her head. Although I only happened to see this calligraphy style once in a book on the young master's desk while serving tea, I absolutely cannot mistake it. I never expected you could write like this. And your handwriting is even beautiful. Could I possibly tell her that I had practiced calligraphy from 3rd grade all the way until 10th grade, if not for setting it aside for the college entrance examinations during the past few years, I could have written even better. I laughed awkwardly, snatching the paper back from Hong Xing's hands. It's nowhere near as nice as you say. I only wrote carefully because I was afraid you'd mock my ugly handwriting. Hong Xingjia, stop teasing me. Besides, what's so special about this? I've long heard that your embroidery skills are unmatched. They say even the feathers on the wild geese you embroider can be seen clearly. I still haven't learned from you yet. You're not allowed to hide your skills, you have to teach me a little. Hong Xing was an honest, kind, and simple-hearted person. She did not overthink things and truly began teaching me embroidery. As for me, I always remained obedient and dutiful, quietly doing my work according to every instruction Hong Xing had given me. Whenever tea needed to be served, if Zhang Xing could deliver it instead, then I let Zhang Xing do it. If I could avoid entering the young master's room, then I absolutely would not enter. To the point that even after being promoted to 2nd rank maid for an entire year, I still failed to leave any impression at all before the young master. Whenever I had free time and no work to do, I would run off to the rear courtyard to cling to Mama Li's side. In the past, Mama Li had always saved delicious pastries for me and brought me little gifts whenever she went out. Now, it became my turn to bring pastries to her. My monthly wages had increased considerably, so I often asked others to bring back little novelties for Mama Li. Mama Li would always wrap her arms around me, listening quietly as I talked, then stuff pastries into my mouth one after another, and every single time before I left. She would always remind me to keep to my duties, do my work properly, and absolutely never follow in Bai Tao's footsteps. Hong Xing understood how deep my feelings for Mama Li were, so she always allowed me to slip away from work and even secretly saved pastries from the young master's room for me to bring over. Thus the days continued passing by. In the blink of an eye, I turned 16 years old. Hong Xing had also reached marriageable age. Her parents arranged a marriage for her and came personally to redeem her from the Lu residence. Remembering how diligent Hong Xing had been all these years, Madame rewarded her with a generous dowry, although I had always known this day would eventually come. When it truly arrived, I felt so happy I wanted to cry, and at the same time, so heartbroken I also wanted to cry. To me, Hong Xing had always been like an older sister. She had constantly cared for and looked after me. When the weather turned cold, she sewed clothes for me. When the weather turned hot, she saved herbal tea for me. Knowing I liked the pastries from the young master's room, she always refused to eat them herself and saved them for me instead. Knowing how much I cared about Mama Li, she would silently cover my duties whenever I went to visit Mama Li, never once uttering a single complaint. I spent half a year's wages buying her a fine jade hairpin. Then I used the high-quality silk rewarded by the masters to personally sew her a new set of clothes. Hong Xing touched the gifts I gave her, hugged me tightly, then held my hands as she spoke softly. Zigui, I know what you're thinking in your heart. But this world has always been harsh toward women. What you desire, I'm afraid it's unimaginably difficult. As your older sister, I feel heartache for you. But as a woman, I also deeply admire you. I watched Hong Xing leave through the grand gates of the Lu residence. When I returned to the room afterward, I only felt endless emptiness surrounding me. I ran to Mama Li's side and cried loudly for a long time. Mama Li comforted me with a few words, but she still had no choice except to urge me back, because now that Hong Xing had left, there was no one remaining to cover my shifts anymore. After Hong Xing departed, Madame summoned me over. The general meaning was that after Hong Xing left, another second-rank maid should ordinarily have been added. However, recently, the young master was preparing to participate in the imperial examinations. She was afraid that a newly assigned maid might not understand the rules and accidentally disturb the young master's peace and quiet. So she decided to let me handle the work alone for the time being. After the young master finished the examinations, another maid would be added later. In addition, since the young master's imperial examination was approaching, Madame instructed me to be extra attentive and serve him properly. Of course, my monthly wages were increased threefold. And if the young master achieved excellent results in the examination, there would be additional rewards as well. There was not much work to begin with. That was why I had previously been able to sneak away from duties so often. Now that my wages had tripled, naturally I was overjoyed and quickly agreed. The academic pressure on children in ancient times truly was not small at all. Having once gone through the college entrance examinations myself, every time I saw the young master sitting at his desk studying tirelessly day after day, I genuinely could not bear it. But such was the nature of the world. No one could do anything about it. Just like the college entrance examinations in my previous life, everyone knew the education system revolved entirely around exams. Everyone knew children studied under enormous pressure. Yet not a single family would willingly allow their children not to study or not to take the exams. Every day, the only thing I could do was prepare mung bean soup in advance and lower it into the well to chill before the young master returned from the academy. Then, once lessons ended, I would have Zhang Xing deliver it to him. The flowers and plants in the room were quietly replaced with orchids that calmed the mind and soothed the spirit. I varied the pastries on the table as much as possible to keep his appetite from growing dull. When the young master studied until midnight, exhausted beyond endurance, I could only secretly hand Zhang Xing a type of incense that helped refresh the mind and keep one awake. The things I could do were very few. After all, I was not the one taking the imperial examination. The path of the examinations was something the young master had to cross himself. Every time I saw him immersed in study, I would inevitably think of my boyfriend from the modern world. He had been exactly the same, always speaking carefully, like some old scholar. Everything he did was meticulous, thorough, and focused. Back then, I loved teasing him. Sometimes I would cover his eyes from behind. Sometimes I would throw myself into his arms and act spoiled. Thinking of those memories, I could not help smiling softly. I raised my head toward the night sky. The moon hung high while the stars were sparse. I remembered watching the moon beside the lake in the park with him. Sometimes, when I felt playful, I would drag him into playing Fei Hua Ling because I had been obsessed with watching Chinese poetry conference at the time. He was a science student, so naturally he could never defeat me. Every time, after only a few rounds, he would raise his hands in surrender and obediently go buy ice cream for me. But in truth, I knew he was deliberately letting me win. How could someone capable of casually reciting Tang and Song poetry, who even had the Book of Songs and Han Yuefu poetry memorized, Possibly lose to someone like me who only knew bits and pieces. The last time we played Fei Hua Ling together, the topic had been poetry about the moon. The final line he quoted was Su Shi's famous verse, "People experience sorrow and joy, partings and reunions. The moon waxes and wanes, grows dim and bright. Nothing has ever remained perfect since ancient times. I only wish the one I love a long and peaceful life, so that though separated by 1,000 miles, we may still share the beauty of the same moon." Unable to stop myself, I softly recited the final 2 lines aloud. By now, everyone over there probably believed I had died in that fire, including him, who would have imagined that I would instead be reborn into another world. Living a humble and cautious life, 8 years had already passed. I wondered how much time had gone by on the other side. Had he managed to move on and begin a new life? Had he buried himself entirely in his research, ignoring the affairs of the mortal world? Had he eventually yielded to his family's pressure and married someone else? Was he now living happily beside his wife and children? Had he already forgotten me? But I still could not forget him. How could I possibly forget? Still, if we truly could not stay together for life, then I only wished for him to live safely and peacefully forever. I quietly wiped away the tears on my face. When I turned around, I discovered eldest young master standing silently at the doorway watching me. At some point, Zhangxing had disappeared. For a brief moment, I stared blankly at the young master's face in a daze. But I quickly regained my senses, lowered my head, and bowed. "Young master, the night dew is heavy and the wind is cold. Please be careful not to catch a chill. You should return to your room." "It's fine. I wanted to look at the moon." "Then this servant will fetch a cloak for you." Just as I walked past him, he suddenly grabbed my arm. "What were you reciting just now?" Startled, I turned my head back and stammered, "And nothing. I only wish the one I love a long and peaceful life, so that though separated by 1,000 miles, we may still share the beauty of the same moon." That poem was only written by Lord Su last year. How could you possibly know it? I struggled free from his grasp, retreated 3 steps backward, bowed deeply, and said, "Young master, you must have misheard." This servant said nothing. "It is late. This servant will take her leave now." I hurriedly turned and ran back to my room, my heart pounding violently as though it would leap straight from my chest. Patting my burning face, I cursed myself inwardly. How could I have been so careless? In the days that followed, perhaps because the young master's studies became even more demanding, perhaps we had both silently agreed not to mention what happened that night, or perhaps I had deliberately been avoiding him. In any case, several days passed peacefully, without incident. I secretly let out a sigh of relief, and the heart that had been hanging in my throat slowly settled back down. I continued living exactly as before. Whenever I had free time, I would run to the back courtyard to visit Mama Li. Several peaceful months passed just like that. As the date of the imperial examination drew closer, Lady Lu ordered Mama Zhang and me to prepare the young master's luggage for his journey to the capital. I had never traveled far from home before, so I felt somewhat uncertain. In the end, I could only prepare things based on what I used to bring during trips in my previous life. Aside from the necessary clothes and books, I stayed up several nights sewing a few small fabric pouches, each filled with different items. Some contained dried sour plums to prevent motion sickness and nausea. Some held charcoal powder packets for absorbing moisture indoors. Others contained various fragrant herbs to remove unpleasant odors. I also prepared padded knee and elbow cushions that were warm yet breathable, and in addition, I folded several large cloth bags. Mama Zhang looked over everything I had prepared. She greatly praised the earlier items, but she could not understand why I had made the large cloth bags. I explained, if the trunks or luggage happen to break on the road and become unusable, these bags can be used to store things instead. And I heard the examination lasts 3 days. Not only are visitors forbidden, but there are also strict limits on what can be brought inside. Spring in the north is still very cold. The young master can use these cloth bags as book satchels. And if the seats are too cold, he can turn the bags over and use them as cushions. I lined the inside with fur. Mama Zhang flipped one over to inspect it. Sure enough, there was a thick layer of sheep's wool sewn inside, soft and warm to the touch. Mama Zhang repeatedly praised me for my careful thinking and specifically instructed Zhang Xing to make sure all those things were brought along. On the day the young master departed, all the servants of Boya courtyard accompanied him to the gates to see him off. As servants, we were not qualified to escort him all the way to the docks. I watched his figure gradually disappear into the distance before turning back toward my room. After shutting the windows tightly, I carefully took out a piece of paper and meticulously copied down a poem. It was Su Shi Shui Diao Gu Tu. At the end, there was even a signature inscription. I took out a pair of scissors, cut away the signature section, burned it, then carefully locked the paper inside my dressing box. During the young master's absence, Boya courtyard became extremely quiet. Every day, aside from sweeping the courtyard and visiting Mama Li in the back courtyard to chat with her, I also carefully tended the flowers and plants in the yard. I had always loved orchids. Their fragrance was light yet enduring, capable of calming the spirit and soothing the mind. Orchids were also regarded as gentlemen among flowers, naturally elegant and refined, beloved for generations by scholars and poets. I had begged Mama Zhang many times before she finally agreed to let me plant several pots of fresh and graceful orchids so their lingering fragrance would drift throughout the courtyard. Those elegant orchids suited the name Boya courtyard perfectly. My skill at growing flowers had been personally taught by Mama Wang herself. After many rounds of careful tending, the orchids in the courtyard had finally begun to bloom, their faint fragrance spreading through the entire residence. One day, while Mama Zhang and I were tending the flowers and plants in the courtyard, the water in the watering bucket ran out. I carried the bucket to the back courtyard to fetch more water. After filling it and returning, I had not yet reached the front courtyard when I heard Mama Zhang speaking respectfully with a man. Quietly, I hid behind the corridor and listened closely. The man said, "This orchid is simple yet elegant, plain yet noble. Planted within my elder brother's courtyard, it complements the harmony of Boya courtyard perfectly. But if I remember correctly, these orchids were not here before." Mama Zhang respectfully replied, "This old servant does not understand such refined things. I simply thought the flowers looked beautiful and smelled pleasant, so I casually planted some. I never expected them to catch second young master's eye. If second young master likes them, this old servant can have 2 pots sent over to your residence." I secretly peeked over and saw second young master standing there, lazily fanning himself with a folding fan. His gaze was unreadable. Suddenly, he burst into laughter and said, "These jade orchids are the hardest to raise. My courtyard is filled with coarse people. I'm afraid they would all die within 2 days. That would truly be a waste. How could they compare to the refined, pure, intelligent, and graceful beauty hidden within my elder brother's inner courtyard? To care for these orchids so naturally and effortlessly, carrying oneself with such elegance and charm. Well then, I shall simply remain someone who admires flowers from afar." After saying that, second young master threw his head back and laughed loudly again. He flicked open the folding fan in his hand, waved it casually twice more, and then led his servants out through the gates. Only after he had gone far away did I carry the bucket forward. This second young master truly was strange. Why had he suddenly come to our Boya courtyard? Mama Zhang smacked my forehead lightly and scolded. And whose fault do you think this is? You insisted on planting these orchids, and then you raised them so beautifully. Second young master has always been fond of romance and elegance, constantly claiming himself to be a man of refined taste. Now that the orchids in this inner courtyard are blooming so splendidly, how could he possibly resist coming here? I stuck out my tongue and shook Mama Zhang's arm playfully. How can you blame me for this? If anyone is to blame, it should be Mama Zhang for having such excellent taste and choosing these jade orchids in the first place. The fragrance travels far, the colors are elegant. And we should also blame Mama Wang for teaching me all her flower-growing skills without hiding anything, which is why I was able to care for these delicate jade orchids so well. So this is entirely your fault and Mama Wang's fault. How could it possibly be my fault? Mama Zhang laughed angrily twice and could not resist knocking me on the head again, making me clutch my forehead in pain. You little thing. No wonder Mama Li and Mama Wang like you so much. This girl truly knows how to turn black into white and confuse people until they lose their way. Holding my forehead, I grinned mischievously and widened my eyes at Mama Zhang. Then does Mama like me? If I'm like this, does Mama still like me? Come on, Mama, tell me. Do you like me or not? Mama Zhang had absolutely no way to deal with me. She sighed helplessly, lightly tapped the tip of my nose, and said, I do. A few days later, the final orchid in the courtyard finally bloomed. At the same time, joyous news from the government office arrived. The eldest young master had not disappointed anyone's expectations. He had successfully passed the imperial examination with high honors, ranking 12th on the second-class list. The entire Lu residence erupted into celebration. Master Lu and Lady Lu not only rewarded everyone in Boya courtyard generously, but even the servants from the other courtyards benefited as well. Before the young master had even returned home, the matchmakers had already nearly worn down the threshold of Lu residence. After lengthy discussions, Master Lu and Lady Lu finally decided upon the youngest daughter of the Shen family, the judicial commissioner's household, Shen Zirua. Shen Zirua's mother was the daughter of the sworn younger brother of the current empress's grandfather. Although the connection was distant enough to circle around several times before reaching the imperial family, they were still considered relatives of the imperial clan. Moreover, Shen Zirua's grandfather, Elder Shen, had once served as an academic official in the Imperial Academy. When the eldest young master previously traveled to the capital, Elder Shen had personally guided him, creating a relationship akin to teacher and student. Meanwhile, Shen Zirua's second elder brother was currently serving in the censorate in the capital, with limitless prospects ahead of him. With such an in-law family supporting him, the young master's future truly appeared boundlessly bright. There was only one issue. This Shen Zirua was famously a delicate noble lady. Her body was weak and fragile. Whenever she went outside, she required 3 to 5 maids attending her at all times. She feared heatstroke and dizziness. She feared getting drenched in rain and falling ill. If she walked too long, she might even faint from exhaustion. However, Miss Shen was also renowned as a great beauty. Rumor claimed she possessed a face capable of toppling cities and kingdoms, and because of her frail body, she carried an additional touch of willow-like fragility and tender vulnerability that stirred pity and affection in anyone who saw her. People even called her Shen Shishir. When Lady Lu discussed this marriage arrangement with the young master, he only fell silent in thought for a moment before respectfully replying, "Everything shall be decided by mother." Knowing Miss Shen's frail constitution, Lady Lu feared she might struggle to bear children in the future and that her son would suffer because of it. So she added, "If there is any girl you fancy, even if her family background is low, mother can still bring her in as your concubine." The young master's expression shifted ever so slightly, but his face remained calm as ever as he replied indifferently, "Mother jests. Since childhood, your son has devoted himself to study and has always regarded the restoration of the Lu family as his personal responsibility. I have never dared to neglect it for even a moment. Other than Mama Zhang, who attends me closely, and a little maid working outside, I have never interacted with other women." "The little maid? You mean the second-rank maid serving at your side? What is her name again?" Replying to mother, "Her name is Zi Gui." Yes, that girl. The little maid who stayed in the inner courtyard for 2 years without even recognizing you, correct?" "Ha ha ha, truly interesting. I think she is quite good. Careful in her work, honest in character, and knows her place. Most importantly, she gives people peace of mind. How about letting her become your bedchamber maid? In a couple of years, once she bears a child, we can raise her status to concubine. What do you think?" A nearly imperceptible gleam flashed through the eldest young master's eyes, yet he still respectfully answered, "Everything shall be decided by mother." When Lady Lu summoned me, I was in the courtyard dividing orchid roots. Mama Zhang happily dragged me into the room and changed me into a brand new set of clothes. She even gifted me an extremely precious red pearl and agate hairpin. I felt uncomfortable and vaguely uneasy, so I asked Mama Zhang what was happening. "Why are you dressing me up so formally all of a sudden?" Mama Zhang smiled and said, "It's a good thing. Once you get there, you'll know." I followed Mama Zhang to Lady Lu's chambers. The eldest young master was also seated properly at her side. Mama Wang stood respectfully behind Lady Lu. I obediently kowtowed and greeted both Madam and the young master. When Lady Lu saw the hairpin in my hair, she smiled with obvious satisfaction. "The first time I met you, you were still a skinny little dark-faced girl. Now your figure has blossomed. Wearing this blue brocade dress and that red agate hairpin, your entire bearing has changed. You truly have become quite a little beauty." I had always known my appearance was not ugly, though I certainly could not be called breathtakingly beautiful. My features were proper and delicate, and after growing older, my complexion had gradually become much fairer as well. If dressed properly, I could indeed be considered a graceful and delicate beauty. However, I did not become lost in Madam's praise, because the words that followed made my entire body feel as though it had fallen into an icy abyss. "You have served by the young master's side for many years and have always been diligent and hardworking. Today, I shall grant you honor and elevate you to the position of bedchamber maid. Once the young madam enters the household, you must serve her properly as well. In the future, if you bear children, I will raise you to the rank of concubine." No wonder Mama Zhang's expression had looked so strange while changing my clothes earlier. No wonder Mama Wang's gaze toward me had been so complicated. No wonder the expressions of everyone in the room had been so varied. Some were jealous, some offered congratulations. But most of all, there was envy and resentment. Of course, I was merely a clumsy second-rank maid with nothing particularly outstanding about me. Yet somehow I had caught both Madam and the young master's favor and received such an elevation. After the young master returned triumphant from the examinations, countless people had been eager to climb into his bed, and yet somehow, the treasure had fallen into my hands. But I did not want it. Seeing me standing there blankly in shock, Mama Wang immediately stepped forward to smooth things over. "This girl must be so overwhelmed with joy that she's gone stupid." Why aren't you thanking Madam yet? I finally regained my senses. Countless thoughts flashed through my mind. In the end, I clenched my teeth and kowtowed 3 times toward Lady Lu. Then I lowered my head completely to the ground, my voice trembling uncontrollably. Madam, Zigui wishes to redeem herself and leave the household. The instant those words left my mouth, the entire room fell deathly silent. Lady Lu froze in place. Even the young master, whose expression had always remained calm and unmoved, stiffened involuntarily. Mama Zhang, standing beside me, immediately dropped to her knees with a thud. She pinched me hard and whispered anxiously into my ear, "What's wrong with this girl? Have you lost your mind?" Then she hurriedly begged Lady Lu for forgiveness on my behalf. After remaining stunned for a moment, Lady Lu slowly suppressed her anger, but in order to maintain the composure expected of the mistress of the household, she still spoke calmly. "Are you serious?" "Yes, madam." "And why do you wish to leave the residence? Do you think becoming my son's bedchamber maid is beneath you?" My shoulders trembled. I knew clearly that in this era, the life of a maid like me was worth less than grass. If the masters were dissatisfied, they could beat or sell me as they pleased, and I would have no power to resist. Yet I still clenched my teeth and answered, "Madam, Zigui is merely a sparrow, while young master is a qilin." Since entering the residence, this servant has always remembered the rules. A servant must keep to her place and must not harbor improper thoughts. Young master is Zigui's master. Zigui would never dare entertain foolish fantasies. Lady Lu glanced at the young master's expressionless face before continuing. "If that is the case, then you could simply refuse. Why insist on leaving the residence? As far as I know, you no longer have any family in this world." Replying to Madam, Zigui entered the residence at 8 years old. Since entering the residence, this servant has never once stepped outside. I once heard the older steward mamas chatting, saying the world beyond the estate is vast beyond imagination. They spoke of green mountains and beautiful rivers, and scenery so magnificent through all 4 seasons that words could not describe it. Zigui knows that as a servant, I should not harbor such improper desires. But in my heart, I long to go outside and see the world for myself. Moreover, after young master marries, he will have the young madam by his side. The 2 of them should live harmoniously together and soon fill the household with children. Wouldn't that be better? If Zigui remains here, I fear it may only make the young madam unhappy. So you actually possess such lofty aspirations? Lady Lu's tone carried faint mockery. Just as she was about to continue speaking, the young master suddenly interrupted. "Mother, what she says is reasonable. If the new bride enters the household and discovers that I already possess a bedchamber maid before marriage, once word spreads outside, people may begin to gossip, and that would be unfavorable. Besides, throughout these years, she has indeed cared for me attentively and fulfilled her duties conscientiously. During this imperial examination, had it not been for the lambskin bag she sewed, your son would likely have endured 3 days seated upon freezing benches inside the examination hall. Why not simply allow her to fulfill her wish and let her leave?" Since the young master had spoken, and perhaps because Lady Lu also remembered how obedient and dutiful I had always been over the years, she said nothing further. She merely ordered Mama Wang to fetch 10 taels of silver for me. "Since my son has spoken, I shall release you today. In consideration of your loyal service over these many years, take these 10 taels of silver. Consider it a complete ending to the bond between master and servant." I accepted the silver and understood Lady Lu's meaning clearly. Since I wished to leave, then I should sever ties cleanly and completely. Once I took the silver, from this day onward, I would no longer have any connection to the Liu family. I bowed deeply, Zigui kowtows to thank Madam. When I returned to Boya courtyard, Mama Li had already heard about everything. She sent Hong Mei to call me over. At that moment, the sun was already sinking in the west. The glow of dusk filtered through the thin paper windows, scattering dim shadows across the dark floor. Mama Li sat with her back facing the window, leaning quietly beside the small tea table near the couch. Mama Li did not light a lamp. The light behind her made it impossible for me to see her face clearly. She sat there in silence, watching as I slowly stepped in from outside the door. I did not know how to begin, so I simply dropped to my knees before her without saying a word. I thought perhaps I had disappointed her. Mama must surely be angry with me. Even if she beat me now, I would not utter a single complaint. Mama Li looked at me kneeling on the ground for a long while before finally sighing, "Get up. The floor is cold. Be careful not to hurt your knees." At that moment, I could not hold back any longer. I threw myself into Mama Li's arms. Unlike when Hong Xing left, I did not cry loudly. I merely buried my face deep against her chest and silently shed tears. Mama Li gently patted my back. Though she was speaking to me, it sounded more like she was murmuring to herself. "I already guessed it long ago. Ever since you made that magpie embroidered coat for me. Such delicate stitching, such remarkable embroidery skills. Those smooth spiral needle patterns. Even I could not compare. I have also seen your handwriting. Graceful and clean, the strokes flowing like drifting clouds and running water, lively and full of spirit. Forget me, even the steward who teaches all of you to write likely could not write so beautifully. You are so clever. How could you possibly be the clumsy, foolish little girl Mama Wang described? At first, I could not understand why you worked so hard to hide yourself and deliberately came here to be a rough servant girl. But now I understand. You were afraid that if the masters noticed you too early, you would be made into a bedchamber maid, married off as part of someone's dowry, or kept trapped beside your master forever, unable to leave. From the very beginning, you already intended to leave this place, didn't you? I kept my head buried in her chest and only nodded softly in response. Mama Li continued, "Outside the manor, you have no relatives and no one to rely on. Staying in the Liu manor, even as a servant, at least you never have to worry about food or clothing. And with your abilities, living with dignity would not be difficult. Tell Mama, why are you so determined to leave?" I lifted my head from her arms, sat upright, and looked at her. "Mama, do you still remember Bai Tao?" "Of course I remember her." "Do you still remember why she was sold out of the manor?" "Of course I remember clearly. She secretly gave the young master an embroidered pouch with mandarin ducks on it. Lady Liu caught her and had her beaten before selling her away." "Mama, do you think Bai Tao's punishment was fair?" Mama Li paused for a moment before answering. Although Bai Tao was wrong, the punishment truly was rather severe. But what does that have to do with you? Mama also knows that Bai Tao's crime was not particularly serious. A beating and expelling her from Boya courtyard would have been enough. But Lady Liu punished her harshly and even sold her away. Why? Because she wanted to kill the chicken to scare the monkeys. She wanted to warn every maid in the Liu manor that anyone who dared harbor improper thoughts would end up like Bai Tao. I continued softly. For merely disturbing the young master's studies and touching upon the interests of the masters, she was not given even a single chance. No dignity was spared before she was sold away. If one day I made a mistake, if I touched the interests of the masters and displeased them, then I would become the next Bai Tao. Could I resist? Could I say no? I am merely property belonging to the masters. No different from a bowl or a teacup in their hands. I reached out and held Mama Lee's hand tightly. Mama, I do not want to be a bowl or a cup. I want to be a person. A person who can control her own fate. A person who can decide her own future. To servants, becoming a bedchamber maid or concubine seems like turning from a sparrow into a phoenix. But in truth, it is merely becoming a slightly higher class servant. The slave contract still belongs to someone else. They can beat you if they wish, punish you if they wish, sell you if they wish. Mama Lee stared at me in shock and murmured, I never knew you carried such deep thoughts in your heart. But you are only a woman. Without anyone to rely on, how will you survive after leaving the manor? Her voice trembled, and tears filled her eyes. I squeezed her hand and smiled gently. Mama, don't worry. Lady Lu did not demand redemption money from me. She even gave me 10 taels of silver. Besides, over these years I have saved some money myself. I will not starve. Not long ago, I exchanged letters with Hong Xing. She and her husband are now running a pastry shop on the main street. I will go stay with her first. With her help and the silver I have saved, I will live well. Mama looked at me with the helpless expression of a mother watching her child grow beyond her control. Finally, she sighed deeply. Fine. Since you already planned everything long ago, then go. Suddenly, she seemed to remember something. She stood up and walked toward the cabinet. After rummaging around for a long while, she pulled all the clothes inside onto the floor before finally taking out a square box about a foot long. She carried the box over to me and opened it. Inside, one half was filled with exquisite jewelry made of pearls and jade, while the other half contained neatly arranged gold and silver. Those things were likely the savings Mama Lee had accumulated over her entire lifetime. She pushed the box toward me. This is the silver I have saved over many years. Living in the manor, I never lacked food or clothing, and every month I still received wages. I never had a chance to spend any of it. Take it all with you. It is always better to have more money for protection. My eyes reddened again. I sniffed softly before smiling. I accepted the box, stared at it for a moment, then gently pushed it back toward her. Mama, a woman like me carrying such a large amount of money alone would not be safe. What if bad people set their eyes on me? It would be better if Mama kept it for now. If one day I truly cannot survive anymore, I will come back and ask Mama for it, all right? Mama Lee thought quietly for a while. Perhaps she felt my words made sense, so she did not insist further. Because the young master's wedding date was drawing near, the entire manor became extremely busy. From the master and Lady Lu down to the maids, pages, and servants, everyone was overwhelmed day and night. Lady Lu sent 2 more maids to Boya Courtyard, but Mama Zhang had no time to train them, so she requested permission from Lady Lu for me to remain in the manor a little longer to teach the 2 girls. Naturally, I agreed. The 2 girls were both only 15 years old. Pretty, obedient, skilled in embroidery and women's work, and even literate, they were the finest among the younger maids. I could more or less guess Lady Lu's intentions. The young madam's health was weak. She likely feared Shenzi Ruo would not be able to bear children, so preparations had to be made early. if the young madam truly could not give birth, then these two girls would probably become future concubines to continue the Liu family bloodline. A few days earlier, the young master had personally given the two maids new names. One was called Du Wan, and the other Zi Wan. When I heard those names, I was genuinely speechless. Did this young master have some sort of grudge against cuckoo birds? I diligently taught the two girls everything I knew. Fortunately, both were intelligent and quick-witted, so I barely needed to exhaust myself before they memorized all my instructions. During that time, I suddenly felt the meaning of the saying, "The waves behind push forward the waves ahead, while the earlier waves die upon the shore." Meanwhile, the young master was incredibly busy. Every day he left early and returned late, seemingly accepting invitations from various friends and acquaintances. But because of that, I unexpectedly gained a period of leisure. Whenever I encountered him these days, I still bowed respectfully just as before. He would merely pass by me with a slight nod, showing no other reaction. I originally wanted to express my gratitude to him, to thank him for speaking up for me before Lady Liu that day. Otherwise, how could Lady Liu possibly have let me go so easily? Yet every single time, before I could say anything, he would hurriedly leave. Either he would summon Zhang Xing into the room, or he would use being busy as an excuse and dismiss me. In the end, I could only give up. That night, long past midnight, I still could not fall asleep, thinking about how I was about to leave this place, the courtyard where I had lived for nearly 10 years. I could not help feeling a trace of reluctance. In the end, I simply got up and opened the window to breathe in some fresh air. By coincidence, my window happened to face one corner of the young master's room. The moment I opened the window, I saw him standing there. His window was also open. The dark night wind blew into the room, scattering his hair wildly in the air. He wore a white inner robe with a large cloak draped over his shoulders, making his already slender figure appear even thinner. He simply stood there quietly in the distance. Clearly, it should have looked like the elegant scene of a noble young master admiring the moon beneath a tranquil night sky, yet all I could see was loneliness. He stared silently out the window, toward my room. He saw me, and I saw him. I said nothing. He also remained silent. We merely gazed quietly at one another across the night. I did not know how many nights he had stood there alone in silence. Nor did I know how long he had been standing there tonight. I only knew that this would likely be the final night he stood there, because tomorrow was his wedding day, and it was also the day I would leave the manor. On the day of his grand wedding, I quietly departed. The front courtyard was filled with laughter and excitement. Music echoed endlessly through the manor as guests came and went in celebration. Everyone in the manor had gone to help in the front courtyard. Only Mama Li, Chun Mei, and Hong Mei came to see me off. Yesterday, Mama Zhang had secretly given me a gold hairpin. It looked extremely valuable. I felt too embarrassed to accept it, but Mama Zhang simply said, "Life outside will never be as comfortable as life inside the manor. Take this hairpin with you. If one day you truly cannot survive anymore, you can exchange it for silver." Unable to refuse, I accepted it and hugged Mama Zhang tightly. After wiping away my tears, I comforted the others and said, "The only regret I have is that Mama Wang is too busy and her residence is too far away. I could not conveniently go to Lady Liu's courtyard to see her, so until now I still haven't had the chance to properly say goodbye." Mama Li and the others escorted me all the way to the back gate. Mama Li held my hands tightly, tears brimming in her eyes as she repeatedly urged me to take good care of myself. Chun Mei and Hong Mei gifted me a pair of embroidered shoes they had sewn themselves, and they too could not stop crying. I hugged them tightly. 8 years together, though we shared no blood relation, after so many years by each other's side, they had long since become the closest family I had in this world. I wiped away my tears and softly comforted them. There is no banquet in this world that never ends. But no matter where I go, all of you will forever remain my dearest family. Mama Lee, I have to go now. Please help me tell Mama Wang that I will miss her very much. I turned to leave when I suddenly heard a young maid calling my name from afar. She came running toward me, panting heavily. I recognized her. She was the little maid who served at Mama Wang's side. Before she could even catch her breath, she hurriedly placed a bracelet into my hands and said between gasps, "Mama Wang told me to deliver this to you." I lowered my head and looked at the bracelet. The jade was of extremely fine quality, though it was clear it had been worn for many years. Most likely, it was the bracelet Mama Wang always kept on her wrist. I quickly asked, "Why did Mama Wang tell you to bring this to me? Did she say anything else?" "She did," the little maid replied. "Mama Wang said that if you can't survive outside, you should take this bracelet to the western side of Chongping City and find an embroidery workshop called Jin Xiufang. The owner there is an old acquaintance of hers. Once she sees the bracelet, she'll arrange work for you." The little maid paused before continuing. Mama Wang also said, "Although your embroidery skills aren't very good, and you're both silly and clumsy, at least you're hardworking. Even if you can't become an embroiderer, you can still do miscellaneous work there and won't end up starving on the streets." I could almost imagine how angry Mama Wang must have been while saying those words. Yet despite everything, she still cared about me. She was afraid I would not survive outside on my own, so she painstakingly prepared a way out for me. I carefully tucked the bracelet away, then asked the little maid to pass along my thanks to Mama Wang before finally turning to leave. As I turned around, I saw Mama Lee standing behind the gate, gazing at me with reluctant eyes until the servant slowly shut the doors completely, cutting off the last glimpse of them from my sight. I lifted my head and looked at the grand residence where I had lived for nearly 10 years. Red walls, green roof tiles, majestic carved beams and pillars. But to me, this place had only ever been a splendid prison, and I was not even the treasured canary within the cage. I was merely a gray sparrow, one whose existence or absence made no difference. A few days earlier, when the steward took me to alter my household registration papers, he had asked whether I wanted to reclaim my original name. I thought about it for a long while. In the end, I shook my head. The name Zigui had followed me for many years. Now, even if I changed back to my old name, I could never return to the past. "There's no need to change it," I told him. "Just add my surname." "Very well," the steward replied. "What was your original surname?" I fell silent for a moment before slowly answering, "My surname is Yang. From today onward, I am Yang Zigui." Following the address written in Hong Xing's letter, I eventually found the pastry shop she and her husband had opened together. It was a tiny storefront tucked away in the corner of a street, difficult for passers-by to notice. Naturally, a place like this was not ideal for business, but the rent was cheap. Hong Xing had set up a small stall outside to attract attention from people walking past. The man standing behind the counter greeting customers was probably her husband. He was a sturdy, honest-looking man with a straightforward appearance. Warmly, he called out to the customers passing by, "Fresh osmanthus cakes just out of the oven. Young master, would you like to try some? This is plum blossom pastry. You won't find this dessert anywhere else on the entire street. Of course it tastes good. Young master, try some first before buying. One Jean, please." "Certainly, young master, just a moment. Here's your change, please keep it safe. If you enjoy it, come again next time." I walked up to the stall. He smiled politely at me. Miss, are you here to buy pastries? Please take a look and see if there's anything you'd like. Hello, I said softly. I'm looking for Hong Xing. He looked at me in confusion. Who are you? I'm Zi Gui. Before he could react, Hong Xing hurriedly ran out from inside the shop. It had been over a year since we last met. Now, with her married woman's hairstyle, the youthful sweetness she once carried had faded somewhat, replaced by the mature charm of a married woman. Hong Xing grabbed my hands tightly, so emotional that tears instantly welled in her eyes, her words stumbling over themselves. Zigui. It's really you. It really is you. I never imagined you would leave the Lu residence so soon. I thought I would have to wait several more years. Hong Xingjia, I said with a smile, my eyes reddening as well. It's me. I've finally come out. And the moment I did, didn't I immediately come running to rely on you? What nonsense are you saying about relying on me? Hong Xing wiped her tears and laughed through them. You're my younger sister. We're family. There's no need for such distant words. At that moment, Hong Xing's husband, who had been standing nearby all along, finally could not help interrupting. Wife, quickly invite the young lady inside to sit. Right. Come in, hurry inside. Hong Xing hastily wiped away her tears and pulled me into the house. After chatting for a while, I gradually came to understand her situation. Her husband's surname was Wang. He was actually her cousin, 2 years older than her. The two of them had already known each other before Hong Xing entered the Lu residence. Later, when trouble struck her family, she was sold into the Lu residence, while her cousin followed his family elsewhere to seek refuge with relatives. Once the disaster passed, he returned with his parents and lived an honest life. Yet even after reaching marriageable age, he stubbornly refused to marry. Under constant pressure from his parents, he finally admitted that he wanted to wait for Hong Xing to come back, and so, the moment Hong Xing returned, the two of them immediately got married. After getting married, the two of them shared a very loving relationship, and together they opened this small pastry shop. Having spent many years in the Lu residence, Hong Xing had learned to imitate many of the pastries served there, and customers loved them. Because of that, even though the shop was hidden away in a remote corner, business was still quite good. For the time being, I stayed at Hong Xing's home. Every day, I left early and returned late, wandering through the market streets. Listening to prices, observing the flow of business, and studying the different districts, I borrowed Brother Wang's clothes, pasted on a fake beard, wore a hat, and disguised myself as a man. I sat in tea houses and taverns listening to people gossip. Sometimes I would buy a pot of wine or tea and treat a few chatty fellows who spoke with spittle flying everywhere, rambling endlessly without noticing the passing time. They talked happily, and I listened happily. After an entire month, I had thoroughly grasped the state of the market. Eventually, I found a storefront I liked. After bargaining several times, I managed to rent it at a reasonable price. When Hong Xingjia learned that I had rented a shop, she guessed that I wanted to start a business and immediately asked what exactly I planned to do. I want to open a small restaurant, I replied. Hong Xingjia found it impossible to believe. Back when we lived in the Lu residence, she had never once known that I could cook. I smiled. When I was young, I suffered terribly under my honored mother's dreadful cooking skills. In order to survive and grow up safely, I had no choice but to find another path and become self-reliant. Little by little, I developed quite decent culinary skills. I recalled my school days in the modern world. During a dormitory gathering between two student halls, I had casually shown off a little and utterly stunned those classmates who could not even distinguish basic seasonings. And it was at that same gathering that I met my boyfriend. He caught my eye, and I entered his heart as well. Smiling, I said to Hong Xingjie, "Don't you believe me? Just wait. I'll cook dinner tonight, and then you'll know whether I'm joking or not." After dinner, Hong Xingjie no longer objected. Instead, she simply said that if I ever needed help, I could come find her anytime. Naturally, I could not have hoped for anything better. With the help of Hong Xingjie and her husband, my little restaurant finally opened for business. I named it Lanjun Pavilion. Hong Xingjie teased me, saying the name sounded far too elegant. It resembled the name of a scholar's study more than a restaurant. The restaurant itself was not large, nor particularly grand or luxurious. It was more like an ordinary family restaurant from the modern era. I hired a server, an accountant, and a cook. Then I dug through every recipe in my memory, adjusting them according to the ingredients and conditions of this world. Some seasonings and ingredients could not be found, so I substituted them with similar alternatives, creating dishes that felt fresh and unique while still suiting the tastes of people in this era. I also gave each dish refined and elegant names: paired wings in flight, bitterness ends, sweetness comes, soaring to the heavens, step by step to success, overflowing joy, 10,000 miles of emerald waves, branches bound together, everlasting companionship, beauty's slender fingers, Chilan pearl, tenfold longing, southern lands, wan air, peach blossom vines. The names all carried beautiful meanings, wishing for lovers to remain together like birds sharing wings, enduring hardship before sweetness arrives. Rising steadily higher, joy filling the home, husband and wife united forever, longing and devotion enduring through life. In truth, however, they were simply ordinary dishes presented in different ways. Take wan air, for example. It was merely wood ear mushrooms boiled until tender, seasoned thoroughly, then wrapped inside thin cucumber slices and arranged neatly on a plate. The mushrooms absorbed the seasoning and became crisp and flavorful, while the cucumber was cool and refreshing with plenty of moisture. Together, they created a perfect summer dish, or the dish called bitterness ends, sweetness comes. In reality, it was simply red dates pierced with small holes and soaked in honey until the sweetness seeped through. They were then stuffed inside hollowed bitter melon cut into cylindrical shapes before being steamed. When eating it, the first thing one tasted was the bitterness of the melon. But before the bitterness could fully settle, the sweetness of the honeyed date spread through the mouth and washed the bitterness away completely. It truly lived up to its name. Although the dishes sounded elegant and complicated, the ingredients and preparation methods were actually simple, so the cost was not high. Naturally, my prices were not high either. Business, especially long-term business, depended on keeping customers coming back. I used some simple advertising and promotional methods I had learned while studying in the modern world. Combined with the novelty of the dishes, the affordable prices, and most importantly the fact that the food was delicious and inexpensive, Lanjun Pavilion quickly began to flourish. Every day, before the doors even opened, customers were already waiting outside to taste the restaurant's fresh dishes. Many servants from wealthy households also lined up at the entrance to buy food for their masters back home. Lanjun Pavilion was merely a small restaurant aimed at common people. It had no private rooms and catered to the lower classes. Those wealthy households did not wish to lower themselves by dining personally inside such a place. Occasionally, servants from the Lu residence would also bring empty food baskets to support my business. Whenever that happened, I instructed the server to package the food carefully. Then I secretly added 2 extra portions along with a few pieces of silver, asking them to deliver them to Mama Wang, Mama Li, and Mama Zhang. Ever since leaving the Liu residence, I had never returned there again. Firstly, the Liu residence gates were heavily guarded. Uncle Li let out a long sigh before finally speaking in a low voice. Miss Yang, you are still young, and you may not understand some things clearly. A woman doing business outside on her own is never easy. Now that Lanjun Tower is thriving, many people have already set their eyes on it. Some covet your recipes, some covet your money, and some. He hesitated for a moment before continuing, some covet you. I raised my brows slightly. Uncle Li, has something happened? He lowered his voice even further. A few days ago, a local ruffian came here drunk and caused trouble. He claimed he wanted to marry you as his concubine. Luckily, young Master Liu happened to be here that day and had someone throw him out. Otherwise, who knows what might have happened. I froze for a moment. I truly had not expected that Liu Wen had secretly helped me again. Uncle Li looked at me worriedly. Miss Yang, you should think about finding someone reliable to depend on. Otherwise, sooner or later, trouble will come knocking. I smiled helplessly. Uncle Li, if women must rely on men in order to survive, then what is the meaning of all my years of struggling? Uncle Li opened his mouth as if wanting to say something more, but in the end, he only sighed deeply. After he left, I stood alone by the window for a long while. Outside, the streets were lively and bustling. Lanterns glowed brilliantly beneath the night sky, and voices drifted endlessly through the city. I suddenly remembered the first night after I left the Liu estate. At that time, I had stood outside those towering red walls and felt as though I had finally escaped from a magnificent prison. Back then, all I wanted was freedom. I wanted to live like a real person. I wanted to control my own fate. And now, although the road ahead was still difficult, at least every step I took belonged to me alone. Not long afterward, Lanjun Towers reputation spread farther and farther. Many wealthy merchants and noble families began hosting banquets there. Even some scholars admired the elegant names of my dishes and the refined atmosphere of the private rooms. Some people came for the food, some came for the scenery, some came simply to see what kind of woman could build such a restaurant from nothing. Business became so good that I was nearly overwhelmed every day. One afternoon, I had just finished checking the accounts when a servant hurried upstairs. Boss, someone downstairs wishes to see you. Who is it? The visitor says his surname is Shen. My hand paused slightly. Shen, for some reason, the first person I thought of was Shen Ziruo. Before I could think further, the servant continued, the gentleman said he came from the capital. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.